I'd like to thank all of you for. Oh, Sean made a mistake. That makes me feel better. Thanks to all the board members for being present and traveling today. I know it's inclement weather. The only one I don't feel bad for is Chief Mills, who left Palm Springs to come here. So we're happy to have all of you. And Adam, would you please do us the honor of sharing public participation instructions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. We are meeting both in person and virtually, and we will support public participation during this meeting through the Zoom webinar platform. Board members, for those participating remotely, if you wish to make a comment, please use the raised hand feature on Zoom or physically raise your hand so that we could see you. Members in the room, please remember to state your name before making a comment so that those participating remotely may know who is speaking. Regarding voting, all agenda items that require a vote will require a roll call vote at the end of each agenda item. Board members in the room, please remember to turn off your microphones when you are not speaking, and please remember to speak into your microphone so that all on Zoom may hear you. Members of the public, we will give the members of the public the opportunity to comment after the presentation of each agenda item and prior to the board voting on an item. You will have 2 minutes for your comment. After your 2 minutes have ended, I will verbally let you know, and you may watch the screen where we will display the 2-minute timer and those in the queue. We encourage anyone wishing to make a public comment to raise their hand at the start of each agenda item. Members of the public will not have the ability to unmute yourself during the discussion until the chair opens it up for public comment. You must raise your hand on Zoom or send a request through public comment at bscc.ca.gov. This is also available on our website. If you are calling by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand and dial *6 to unmute yourself. I will call on those who have raised their hands and those who have emailed your request to speak, and I will ask you to unmute yourself. As a reminder, I will notify you when the 2-minute timer sounds. The 2-minute timer will be visible on the screen, so please try to keep track of your time. When the time is up, you must complete your comment so that we have the opportunity to hear from everyone who wants to make a comment. Also, if your comment aligns with other speakers, please feel free to associate your comment to prior speakers. Thank you for your patience and understanding as we ensure all speakers can be heard. The last agenda item is the opportunity for any members of the public to make a comment on any agenda items or other comments in general. We will call the members on Zoom first, then the members in the boardroom. Public participants in the room, when it is time for public comment, please form a line at the podium. If you wish to, please state your name. As always, we thank you for your patience. Madam Chair, that concludes my instructions.
Thank you, Adam. And for the record, Supervisor Chavez is joining us on Zoom. Adam, will you please take the roll?
Chair Penner.
Present.
Mr. McCumber.
Present.
Mr. Johnson.
Present.
Mr. Haynes.
Here.
Mr. Taylor.
Present.
Ms. Chavez.
Here.
Mr. Richard.
Here.
Ms. Guard.
Here.
Mr. Mills.
Here.
Mr. Dykes, Mr. Budnick, Ms. Zaragoza, and Ms. Kumpion are absent today. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Adam. Just a couple of announcements. First is that there will be a closed session at the end of the meeting. We'll clear the room and board members and applicable staff will stay with us during that item. The other announcement is that we are going to switch the order of action items in that item F will move down to last in the batting order and item G will be moved up. So the detention facilities inspection update will be the last action item discussed today, and we will do the corrective action plan process prior to that item. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, we're going to turn to the information items, and happy Executive Director ready and willing to go on her report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members. I'm Katie Howard, the Executive Director here at the BSCC. I do have a number of items to review here, so I will try to be efficient. And I'm happy to start with a big warm welcome to a new member of the BSCC executive team, Casey Warmoth. Casey Warmoth has been promoted to the position of as Deputy Director over the Standards and Training for Corrections and Research Divisions. We combined those two functions in a teeny bit of a reorganization. And Casey has been with the BSCC since 2006. She has extensive experience related both to STC and research. She has built an amazing team in our research division. They've done outstanding work on our grant processes related to RFPs, developing rating criteria, and program evaluation. And she has done incredible leadership work in developing data collection efforts and surveys, as you're aware. The STC division will also benefit from Casey's knowledge and academic background in selection standards. So I'm really pleased that Casey is here. And I also want to thank and acknowledge Greg Hossman for serving as acting deputy director in STC for several months. Turning to board updates, the date of July 1st, 2024 was a big date for this board. There are two new board positions that have been added statutorily through AB 268 by Assemblymember Weber, which was enacted last year. So there will soon be a licensed healthcare provider and a licensed mental or behavioral health provider added to this board. Both will be appointed by the governor. We are actively recruiting for these two new board positions, and we anticipate that those appointments will be made soon. Also on July 1st, the responsibilities of the Director of In-Custody Death Review took effect here at the BSCC. We're working with the governor's office on that as well. And since these statutory responsibilities have already taken effect, we have trained local data reporters in the detention facilities about how to make initial reports to the BSCC in the event that there is a death in custody. And the board already adopted the regulation to support that effort. So those things are in process. And there will be much more news to come as this office ramps up. I'm pleased to report related to the Director of In-Custody Death Review that the governor proposed funding in the amount of $3.3 million and 15 positions as part of May Revise, and that was included in the final budget. As you can imagine, we need a number of different kinds of staff, and so we'll be working on all of that in the coming months. Are there any questions from the board about these updates? Okay, great. I'd like to add a few more notes on the final 24-25 budget. We will be talking later today about cohort 2 of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Grant and the recommendations for funding there. And in addition, the governor and the legislature have made an additional $13.25 million available for this grant program. So we will be releasing a third RFP on MMIP later this year, and we'll take the time in the intervening months to get the word out to tribal communities that there is more funding available. Also related to grants, as was required in the DJJ realignment bill from 2020, this year's budget effectuated the transfer of all juvenile justice related grants from the BSCC to OYCR, the Office of Youth and Community Restoration. Included in that transfer are the Title II and SACJ program, the Juvenile Reentry Grant, and the reporting on the YOBG and JJCPA state grants. There were some grant reductions that were finalized in the budget. Just to remind you, we've provided updates earlier, but eliminated were the Proud Parenting Grant, the funding for the Community Corrections Partnership Plan and reporting, that was $7.9 million. There was a reduction to the post-release community supervision, and the medication-assisted grants that this board had approved at an earlier meeting, those were eliminated. There was a loan made from Prop 64 in the amount of $150 million. Do I have that right? I think that's right. I can be corrected later if that's not the right number. We are also want to give you an update on the funding for the CALVIP program, the Violence Intervention and Prevention Program. That has for many years been funded through general fund dollars, but pursuant to AB 28 from last year, which provides an excise tax on firearms and ammunition, that revenue will now fund the CALVIP program going forward, and the Department of Finance has estimated had estimated that there will be 75 million available in the first year. However, I'm going to ask Aaron to provide some information about a lawsuit on this tax that was recently filed.
Yes, very briefly, Madam Chair and members. Yeah, a lawsuit was filed in San Diego Superior Court from plaintiffs representing the National Rifle Association, California Rifle and Pistol Association, and the Firearms Policy Coalition, challenging the constitutionality of this new excise tax. The status conference is set for January, so there is a chance that this funding might go away, but we anticipate, based on just the court scheduling at this time, that we can anticipate that the money being available for at least to do the grant making processes, and to the extent that that funding is not available later, we can work with the Department of Finance and the governor's office about seeing how the program might be made whole later. But again, that would assume that the challenge is successful, and I don't make that assumption at this point, but just wanted to flag.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. I want to mention a project that our research division initiated related to the Prop 47 grant. We have a dedicated researcher in that program, and she had noticed that some of the Prop 47 grantees were having comparatively better experiences in engaging Latino participants in those services. So under Prop 47, as you know, it's mental health and substance use disorder treatment programs. So we initiated a qualitative review and did an evaluation that included focus groups, interviews with program participants, as well as the agencies running those grants, to try to figure out what some good advice to the rest of the field might be. I just wanted to say a few things about this. I'm really pleased that we did this work. There are two primary themes that emerged from the evaluation, and that has to do with hiring culturally competent staff, specifically staff who are bilingual. And the second is the importance of establishing trust and providing participants a safe space. I don't think either of those findings would be particularly surprising to anyone, but we do have a great report, and there are 6 specific evaluations. More of that can be found on our website. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that. And then finally, and Adam will help me with the visuals on this, I have preliminary data to report on the first quarter of data that we collected through the opioid survey, which the board approved at our April 2024 meeting. Again, this is preliminary in nature. We will have a more detailed analysis after we receive the second quarter of data. So the first round was due on June 10th of this year, and it covered data for the period of January 1 through March 31. So there are some highlights, and we want to provide a caveat that our research team is continuing to clarify certain numbers with the reporting facilities. So you may see some fluctuations as we refine the data, but I know this has been of great interest. So we wanted to let you know what we have so far. Beginning with the adult detention facilities, we had a 90% response rate, which is very, very good, certainly for any survey. There are 120 local adult detention facilities, and we heard from 108 of those. 99%, that's 107 facilities, report that they do have the opioid antagonist available within the facility. And during that first quarter, there were 207 unique incidents of opioid antagonist use. As I mentioned, we'll have more information about the success of those interventions when we come back in September. Information about how the antagonists are available and what training is provided. We found that 99% of the facilities are accessible to the custodial staff, and 66% of the facilities told us that the custodial staff have the antagonists on their duty belt, so they're with the staff at all times. And then all facilities are providing staff with training and education for the administration of the antagonists. 27% of the facilities do have the opioid antagonists accessible to people who are detained, some in housing units, some in common rooms, and most of these facilities are providing training and education about how to administer those. And also of interest, I think that's the next slide, Adam. We after having a whole lot more input into what should go into the survey, we landed on a way to try to assess how opioids are being introduced into the facilities. And so what we learned from the detention facilities is that And this reminding you, these are the adult numbers here. In the first quarter, there were 655 known instances reported of opioid introductions. 51% of those were through mail or package deliveries. 43 were through, were opioids were introduced on the people who were being detained. And then a very small number, less than 1%, came in through sworn custodial staff. There's additional information available in your printed handout and on our website, and we will provide, again, more detailed information in September. I'd like to turn now to the the juvenile detention facilities. Here we had a 98% response rate. And 100% of the juvenile facilities that responded do have the opioid antagonists available. They reported 4 unique incidents of opioid antagonist use in the first quarter. And similar numbers about the availability of training for staff. 67% of the facilities have the antagonists accessible to youth supervision staff, and 40% say they're on their duty belts, so available at all times. 94% of the facility staff report the antagonists are accessible to the medical staff. All provide training similar to the adults. And in terms of the methods of introduction, in the first quarter, there were 19 known incidences of opioid introduction, and of those, 63% were through youth who were detained, 21% through mail or package deliveries, and 11% through visitors who came to the facilities. That's really all I wanted to report. Are there questions on this or any part of my update? Judge Guard?
Yes, thank you. I found that encouraging data, but I have a question.
Sure.
Is responding to a survey from the board optional on the part of the facilities?
It is indeed optional.
is?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any follow-up with those that did not respond?
Yes, always. Yes, we email, we request again, and I'm happy to ask Casey to add any thoughts if she would like to. I think in general, we have well-established relationships with data reporters. And so, that we had a big webinar to explain how these data should be reported. There will be follow-up with the reporters. And Casey, do you want to add anything? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I see Supervisor Chavez.
Great. Supervisor?
Yeah, so first, I just wanted to say really thank you to you and your staff for getting this, just moving us forward. I feel like we could have discussed the survey in perpetuity,
Yes.
because you never get them just perfect. I really wanted to acknowledge too that we had so much input from the community because there was such a lot of interest in this that, again, wrestling this to the ground was no small feat. I would be, just as a next step, I think if it could be agendized as an item after you get to maybe the second or third quarter, so that there would be enough information to give an analysis of what you think we've learned from that, I think would be really helpful. And I won't be on the board when that happens. I'll be out of office, but I hope that's something that you all colleagues will consider, because I do think this is going to stay a really an intense problem. And the other thing I have to say is, from getting a chance to work with my colleagues on the board, I learned an awful lot about what opportunities there may be for interventions. But I feel like that discussion isn't ripe yet because we don't have enough data, which I think you pointed out in your presentation. So thank you again for the excellent work.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Chavez. I know this was of particular interest to you, and yes, we absolutely will be doing further analysis after we have more data. I expect this will be of great interest to the Director of In-Custody Death Review as well, this topic area. And so yes, thank you for all the work that you put into it, and this will be back before the board when we have more data and when our team has had a chance to look further into what we're learning. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody on the board wish to comment on this item? I just would like to express my gratitude to Casey and the staff. And it was a heavy lift and not simple to do. I'd also like to express my gratitude to the field. I mean, to have voluntary participation and have this depth of people complying with the survey is remarkable and I think represents California well. Okay, any members of the public wish to comment?
I have no members of the public.
Thank you. Katie, is that the end of your presentation?
That's all I had, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, yes.
It says sworn custodial staff. There are more than sworn members working in the jails. Was that intentional or was it just not, there was no reporting on it?
I think I might need to ask Casey for backup on this, but my understanding from talking with the research team is that there was an interest in finding out, of course, there are many, many people inside of a detention facility. There might be volunteers coming in to do programming. Certainly there's medical staff. And then the category of sworn custodial staff was intentionally, distinctly identified. So if opioids were brought in by a person, what role did that person have? How'd I do, Casey?
Have other categories? We did have other categories of staff, like programming staff and non-custodial staff. The numbers that we shared were the ones that had reported instances. Yep.
Madam Chair, we actually have one member of the public.
Thank you, Adam.
If we could get the timer up. We'll set it for 2 minutes. Oh. I'm going to call on Yusuf Miller. Yusuf, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yusuf Miller. I'm with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition out of San Diego County, the Saving Lives in Custody campaign. I am so excited that July 1st has finally reached us and that we can get started on these 3 seats on the BSCC. I've heard that you said you're going to be involved in helping to find the proper people for these positions, but I would urge you to make sure that the medical staff and the mental health staff are not prior law enforcement. We don't want to come into the same issue where we have an echo chamber where we don't have fresh eyes on the medical situation in our jails in the state. And the same with mental health issues. And these issues are crisis at the moment. So I would urge you to please consider not only that they are not prior law enforcement, that we can get fresh eyes on this system, but also that they are there's community input on suggestions that community and organizations might have of people who have walked the walk for a very long time and that can add to and make this situation survivable for our incarcerated loved ones. So I just wanted to give that as an advice on those 2 seats, and then the seat for the director of in-custody death and the staff, that they have a sort of attitude or a culture of decarceration in a way that we see that the people who have lost their lives in custody, whether they should have been in custody in the first place, and to address those kinds of issues that I think exacerbates our problem in custody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I just add a little clarifying comment? Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Appreciate your comment. Just to clarify, there are 2 new members to be added to the board, and we heard your recommendations around that, a licensed medical provider and a licensed behavioral health or mental health provider. The director of in-custody death review is not a board member, but will be a member of our staff. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's
Thank
the
you.
governor's appointee, but a member of our staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, remarks from the board?
Chair, I just said one thing, Kirk Haynes, Chief Probation Officer in Fresno. I just want to say thank you to staff for the work and how we were to operationalize the survey. I know a lot of work went into the categories of questions and those kinds of things, but I think for a facility operator such as myself, it's really good information for me to be able to see on a statewide level, really what are the challenges that that we all have as we try to combat having opioids and any other kind of substances that are being brought in. So it's good to be able to just see that in the congregate, both in the adult and on the juvenile side as well. So it helps
Chief.
us to make plans for making sure that we can stop things from coming in. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief.
Anything further? I turn to council for legal update.
Just briefly, Madam Chair, as always, I want to draw the board's attention to the various action items that we have. We have 3 different grant programs that we're going to be, two grant programs that we're going to be kicking off in terms of establishing ESCs, and to remind folks to offer themselves up for recusal when we get to those items if your agency might be, you or your agency might be looking to applying for those grants. In particular, CalVIP, with recent legislative changes, that grant used to be restricted to just 2 cities and CBOs. The eligibility criteria has expanded to counties now, and counties specifically that have cities in them that have high, that meet a category of certain crimes of violence occurring within those jurisdictions. I would want to flag that that Supervisor Chavez, that grant, Santa Clara would be eligible for that grant. So you may wish to recuse on that item if the county would be interested in applying for that grant. And then as well, Chief Haynes, Fresno also falls into that category. And with
Thank you,
that, I
Adam.
turn it back to the
Second.
chair.
Thank you. And I see, Adam, that there's just a reference to the legislative update in your binder, and we won't be calling for comment at this time on that. Any comments from the board on the legal update? Thank you. Any members of the pub?
No.
Being none, we're going to move on down the road here, and we are going to go to the consent calendar, which is item A and B on our agenda. That is the minutes of the April 11th board meeting and the Burn Jag small jurisdiction allocation recommendation. And we're requesting approval on those 2 items. Does anybody wish to pull one of those items? Does anybody have any comments on those items? Any members of the public wish to comment on those items?
I do not have any members of the public.
Because I'm trainable, I'm looking for a motion and a second.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber. Aye. Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Yes.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion, Mr. Mills.
I too.
I too will. Thank you, Adam. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you. I do like it when you get slightly flustered, Adam. I don't know. Moving on now to the action item discussion items on our agenda. Item C, the Adult Reentry Grant Program. Ian, there you are again.
I am here again, ma'am. Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Ian Silva, Field Representative with the Corrections Planning and Grants Program Division, presenting agenda item C. This agenda item requests the establishment of an executive steering committee to develop requests for proposals for cohort 4 of the Adult Reentry Grant Program. The Adult Reentry Grant provides funding for community-based organizations to deliver reentry services for people formerly incarcerated in state prison. Since it was established in the Budget Act of 2018, the ARG program has received ongoing annual funding with more than $281 million funding the first 3 cohorts of ARG grantees. Including the $7.8 million in ARG funding that remains unallocated from cohort 3, there is approximately $121 million available for cohort 4, which will be equally split between rental assistance and warm handoff and reentry services as prescribed by the budget language. The BSCC will retain a portion of the funding for administrative costs not to exceed 5%. Apologies, technical issue there. Staff will work with the appointed chair to establish an ESC that is diverse in professional and lived experience, geography, gender, and demographics. The ESC's composition will also reflect the relevant stakeholder experience as prescribed by the Budget Acts. The tentative timeline necessary to administer the competitive RFP process for cohort 4 of the ARG program is provided on the current slide. Therefore, staff recommends the board appoint a chair to the Adult Reentry Grant Executive Steering Committee, delegate authority to the chair to work with BSCC staff to establish a diverse ESC with relevant subject matter experience and to modify membership as needed. Approve the proposed activities and tentative timeline associated with development of the RFP, and to authorize the ESC to oversee the development of the ARG request for proposals and to make funding recommendation. This concludes my presentation. I'm of course available to ask any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Ian. And before I toss this to the board for questions or comments, I would like to recommend DAPO Director Jason Johnson to chair this executive steering committee. And I do that already knowing that he's agreed to do that. I didn't even have to twist very hard. He was very eager to take on this project. And beyond that, he has a great deal of expertise in the area. And I think it's going to be highly successful with you at the helm. So would you like to verbally put your yes on the record?
Madam Chair, yes.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
I look forward to the
You want
challenge.
to say anything you'd like to say?
No, I'm excited about the opportunity. I think it's something good, especially when we're talking about the formerly incarcerated individuals coming back into the community. So being in this space for 22 plus years, I think it's a good opportunity to spearhead something
You
like
were
this.
clearly the obvious choice and a good move you make, because your other colleague at CDCR would have been my next choice. It was a, it was a, it was a big save. Thank you. Thank you. Any members of the board wish to comment on this item? Thank you. Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. I just had one question. One, I'm very excited about this body of work, and I'm glad you got a volunteer to play a leadership
Voluntold.
role. One question I had is the analysis of the effectiveness of the program, does that come out of the 5%, or is there an additional pot for research and review of the program?
I can take that one, Madam Chair. Supervisor Chavez, the grantees do have a portion of the grant dollars that they get to put toward a program evaluation. So it's not taken out. The 5% admin or the BSCC administrative costs, that certainly includes some of our research staff, but I took your question to mean for the grantees. And as part of their budget, they have funding dedicated to evaluation.
And is the evaluation structure one that they all agree on, and that way it's consistent throughout? So as you're looking at the results, you can say, because I have to say, a number of issues that you all have played a leadership role in instituting, the evaluations have been so important in terms of even taking lessons learned when groups aren't getting funding, to be able to use what you've been able to demonstrate works and doesn't work at a state level.
Thanks again. We establish a quarterly progress report, which is QPR for short. And so that is a standard data collection instrument that all the grantees use.
And then you do the analysis based on their what information they get to you.
Yes, I think I'd like to, Casey, I keep invoking you, but would you please come up to the mic and explain a little bit more about how the QPR data are analyzed and used?
Sure. For the statewide evaluation of the ARG grant program, we're doing it first for cohort 2 and now also for cohort 3. When grantees are funded, we look at all of their projects and develop a QPR that we believe that can assess data across the majority of the grantees in a similar fashion and provide them definitions for that. We review their submissions quarterly to follow up with them to clarify any data anomalies or questions we might have. And that is compiled across all grantees. For cohort 2, there is currently a dashboard on the Adult Reentry Grant website that you can kind of see their progress to date so far. that should be coming soon for cohort 3. That's what we do at the statewide level across all grantees. Each grantee for cohort 3 is responsible to do their own local evaluation of their individual grant project. And that would focus on that grantee's specific goals and objectives. We do give them guidelines for their local evaluation of their grant project, but that is individually driven by their needs as well and their specific goals and objectives. So while we may pull information from their final local evaluation report for the qualitative context information for the statewide evaluation, we do not rely on their local evaluation reports just because they are so specific to their grant project. So 2 different levels of evaluation occurring, one very specific to their individual projects, and then the other a little more general in nature of what we can say across all grantees.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. Any other board members wish to have a question? Well, Casey left really quickly. So I believe she does not want a question. Any other questions or comments?
I do have one, Madam Chair. Casey, just in regard to the statewide evaluation of how that's done, the reentry program has been in place since 2018. Is that correct? I think that's what Ian said.
Yes.
Is there a plan? I'm sure it's in the legislation for there to be a report to the legislature regarding the effectiveness of the program. Is that part of the information that we collect on a statewide level to do some kind of an analysis of that kind?
I do not believe that the legislation required us to do a report on
Okay.
the outcome of its effectiveness. We chose to do so.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Any members of the public, Adam, either in the room or on the Zoom?
We have no one on Zoom. If there's anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item, please approach the podium. And we do not have any.
Thank you. Final comment I have is that if anyone would like to participate in this executive steering committee, you may contact Ian. And I now, yet again, I'm going to ask for a motion in a second.
I'll move to approve the 4 actions that denoted in the item.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Mr. Mills.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item C.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item D on our agenda, Mike Martinez will join us at the podium on the California Violence Intervention Prevention Grant. Prior to that, look at Aaron's so ready. He's got his,
Madam Chair,
we have a voluntary recusal.
Chavez also recusing,
Thing.
just in case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Stay close and we'll come find you. All right, Mike. Do you want me to kill some time for you while you're getting your technology straightened out? Maybe Casey would like to come forward one more time. I'm just asking for a friend.
Right there. Yeah, you got it.
It's her first meeting in her official capacity, so we get to tease her.
Just 2 slides. There you go. Well, good morning, Board Chair. Good morning, Board members, and good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Martinez, Field Representative with BSCC, and I'm here to present Agenda Item D to the Board to request the establishment of an Executive Steering Committee and a chair designee with delegated Executive Steering Committee authority in order to develop a request for proposal for a 5th round of funding for the California Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant. The Executive Steering Committee will be composed of diverse individuals. Moreover, the committee
will consist of some individuals who have actually been impacted by gun violence, and will have the director of the Attorney General's Office of Gun Violence Prevention or their name designee. BSCC has administered 4 rounds, that is 4 cohorts of CalVIP funding that has provided more than $250 million to California cities and community-based organizations for local violence intervention and prevention efforts. Assembly Bill 762 enacted last year brings a specific focus of CalVIP to reduce gun violence in heavily impacted communities. So, in addition to California cities and community-based organizations, this 5th round of funding could also include counties and tribes that have cities disproportionately impacted by gun violence. The 5th round of funding has a maximum grant amount of $2,500,000 per year and requires BSCC to make available 20% of a grantee's total award at the start of their grant to get them going. Also, historically, CalVIP has been funded at $9 million per year from the state's general fund. However, with Assembly Bill 28 that went into effect on July 1st, 2024, an 11% gun tax from retail sales and guns and ammunition now goes into the school safety fund for violence intervention and prevention. The first $75 million of this established school safety fund, or what's available, will be continuously appropriated annually to BSCC for the CalVIP grant. And as BSCC's legal counsel, Aaron, mentioned, there has been a recently filed lawsuit to try and block this gun tax and ammunition bill. Nonetheless, in conclusion, staff recommends, there's a timeline, okay. In conclusion, staff recommends that the board appoint a chair of the California Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant Program Executive Steering Committee, delegate authority to the chair to work with BSCC staff to establish a diverse executive steering committee with relevant subject matter expertise, and to modify membership as needed. Approve the proposed activities and tentative timeline associated with development of the request for proposal. Authorize the ESC to oversee the development of the CalVIP request for proposals and make funding recommendations. That concludes my presentation. Thank you. I'm here for questions.
Thank you. Looking to the board for any questions or comments? Seeing none. I believe this is yet another moment that the chair likes to relish, which is we have a volunteer to chair this executive steering committee, and I'd like to thank and acknowledge Judge Janet Guard for agreeing to do so. I personally did not twist her arm, but Katie said it went pretty well. Yeah, she does an excellent job of that too. We try to not double team. You have done this knowingly because you've participated in a number of these executive steering committees. So I appreciate your yes and look forward to your final product down the road. And anybody who knows anybody that would like to participate in this ESC, please contact Michael. With that said, seeing no further comment from the board, are there any members of the public that would like to comment?
No comments from the public.
Thank you. Any members in the room anywhere? Or do we, 0? Okay,
Not having
thank you,
members.
thank you. Back to the board. I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I'll move to appoint Honorable Janet Guard as the ESC Chair for the CalVIP grant and approve the
Thank you.
process.
And the final, you approve all the recommendations.
Everything there listed in
But
this.
kind of you to call out Janet Guard personally. I appreciate that.
Having been in this seat before, good
Yes.
luck.
Now, that wasn't called for. Okay, now do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you, thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber. Aye. Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Haynes and Ms. Chavez recused, Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Mr. Mills.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item D.
Thank you. I would then, thank you, Mike. Or Michael, I don't know which you prefer. I know you said yesterday, Mike. We'll find our recused board members and bring them back on board. Eddie has joined us. Good morning to you. You want to take a little time here to get your PowerPoint up or you?
For me.
Okay, then.
Nope, nope.
Okay, we have all members of the board back. For item E, that is the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Grant Program Cohort 2, requesting funding recommendations. And Eddie, take it from here.
Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Eddie Escobar, Field Representative with the Corrections Planning and Grant Programs Division. And I will be presenting agenda item E as recommended by the Executive Steering Committee. This agenda item requests board approval of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Cohort 2 Grant Awards as recommended by the ESC. First, I will provide a brief history of the MMIP grant program. The grant program was established in the State Budget Act of 2022. This grant provided competitive funding to federally recognized tribes in California to support an array of activities, such as outreach and awareness campaigns, mental health and substance use disorder treatment, family supportive services, community healing activities, human trafficking education, or to foster collaboration between tribes and their local law enforcement partners. In July 2022, the board approved the establishment of the Executive Steering Committee to be chaired by board member Norma Kupion, authorized staff to work with the chair to establish a diverse ESC, and authorized the ESC chair to oversee the grant development process. The first RFP made $11.4 million of funding available and was released in April of 2023. Only 4 tribes submitted applications in response to the first RFP. The board approved 4 proposals requesting $3.3 million in funding, leaving $8.52 million unallocated. The State Budget Act of 2023 included a one-time augmentation of $12 million, which made approximately $19.92 million available for a second round of grant funding. In an effort to expand outreach for the second cohort, last year, BSCC representatives participated in several tribal events, not only to increase awareness of the MMIP grant, but also to receive input from the tribal community for the ESC to consider in the Cohort 2 RFP. In October 2023, the ESC reconvened and agreed to several non-substantive revisions to the Cohort 2 RFP. Some of these changes included additional language to highlight the flexibility in the types of activities grant funds can be used for, encourage collaboration among 2 or more tribes, and to encourage partnerships between tribes and their local law enforcement partners. The tribal community also requested a longer application period for planning and coordination among tribal partners. So the Cohort 2 RFP also extended the application period from 2 months to 4. On November 17, 2023, the board approved the release of the Cohort 2 RFP with a submission due date of March 15, 2024. The expanded outreach was a success. BSCC received 20 proposals requesting over $21 million, and after further review, 18 of the 20 tribes met the submission criteria and are now being recommended for funding. In conclusion, on behalf of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Grant ESC, staff recommends that the board fully fund the 18 proposals totaling $19.58 million for grant projects to federally recognized tribes in California to support efforts to identify, collect case-level data, publicize, and to investigate and solve cases involving missing and murdered Indigenous people. I know Norma's not here, but I would like to thank her for serving as chair of the ESC and all the other ESC members for their commitment to the success of this program. And as mentioned earlier, I again want to highlight that in the recently enacted 2024 state budget, there is yet another one-time augmentation of $13.25 million to the MMIP grant. Soon, BSCC will be planning to release a third RFP to distribute these funds. There will be more to come at the September board meeting. Madam Chair, this concludes staff's presentations. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Eddie. And I want to compliment you and your colleagues for pushing this item. Certainly, we were very concerned when the first round went out and we didn't get the kind of attention that we had hoped to get. And I think the outreach of you and your colleagues has gone a long way towards what we see today. I'd also, aside from the recommendations, if you have a moment, anyone in the public or on the board, the summaries of what this money is going to be used for are really interesting, and I'm super glad they're attached to this agenda item. Any other board members wish to have any questions or comments on the issue?
Madam Chair, I do have just I guess a question or a comment. One, thank you for the work on this. It's nice to see towards the end of the item that we did get a response that we were looking for, because initially I was concerned. And so one of my comments was going to be, I mean, I know that there are some of my share of friends that have phenomenal relationships with the communities that they serve and the indigenous populations. And so my concern is that maybe some of these tribes don't have the ability or resources or capability to do something like this. And should we look in the future of not just partnering, but even letting, as long as there's a better recognized tribe attached to it, letting a county sheriff receive this funding to then go, because I know like Billy Hansall and Chad Bianco, they work really closely with their tribal communities, and that may be a way to spark more interest, because ultimately that is going to fall on some local law enforcement to do these investigations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Are there any members of the public?
I do not have members of the public on Zoom. If there is anyone in the room who wish to make a comment, please approach the podium. And we do not have any members in the room.
Madam Chair, I did just have one comment.
Yes.
In regard to, thank you so much, Eddie, for the work and Norma in her absence. But, looking at the summaries, I just wanted to make a note of the Chukchansi tribe in Fresno County and the work that they're going to be doing toward domestic violent cases. Really incredible that they'll have that opportunity to be able to do that. Fresno County Probation is one of the few probation departments that does run a victims services program in the state. And so to, of course, be an available resource for them as they work through the funding and the grant, it's really good to be able to see that resource coming to Duchansey. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And that's where I started my career, in victim witness in Fresno County. I need that on the record right now. And I would like to thank Norma Kumpian for her work on this. She's also a very agreeable board member who's available to serve as needed. And these ESCs are not simple, although, as I told Jason, and I know you know, Janet, our staff does an incredible heavy lift to make the job as easy and palatable as possible, because you all have busy lives. With that said, Adam.
We need a motion and a second.
Darn it, I got so excited this time. Okay, we need a motion and a second.
Madam Chair, I'll also move, but on staff's recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Adam, let's try it again.
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Mr. Mills.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item E.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
And as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we are going to take item G prior to item F. I see Ms. Ganter approaching the podium. This is the corrective action plan process, Welfare and Institution Code 209, requesting approval. Yes. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. It's still morning, yes. Members of the board, colleagues, and members of the public. My name is Allison Ganter. I'm a Deputy Director here with the Board of State and Community Corrections at in the Facility Standards and Operations Division. I'm here to present Agenda Item G, which is your approval, hopefully, of our plan for receiving and approving corrective action plans pursuant to the Welfare and Institutions Code, Section 209D. So as a little bit of background, the Board of State and Community Corrections is required by Welfare and Institutions Code WIC Section 209, Subdivision D, to make a determination of suitability of any juvenile detention facility that is out of compliance with one or more sections of Title 15 and certain conditions are not met. Subdivision D also requires that facilities that have items of noncompliance file an approved corrective action plan with the BSCC within 60 days after receiving notice of noncompliance. And an item of noncompliance must be resolved within a reasonable time frame not to exceed 90 days. So Welfare and Institutions Code Section 209D does not describe a process for receipt and approval of a corrective action plan. To provide consistency in receipt and approval at the May 2023 board meeting, the board delegated approval of the corrective action plans, or CAPs, to the FSO Deputy Director and directed staff to outline a process for receipt and approval of CAPs. In September of 2023, staff provided the board with a draft outline of the timetable for the draft cap review and approval process and informed the board that staff would continue to refine the draft and recommend a proposed cap process at a future board meeting, which is today. The report and attachment summarize this proposed process, and a copy of that is in your binder. Please note that there will be internal policies and eventual regulations that correspond with this process. This policy is narrowly focused on the language in WIC Section 209D. It's intended to interpret and operationalize the requirements related to the notice of noncompliance, to the submission and approval of the cap, the process for resolving the items of noncompliance, determinations of unsuitability, and where necessary, notice that a determination of suitability would be made. So I will just take 2 seconds and just take 1 second. Hopefully, everybody can see this graphic. It's one that we've used in the past and have just updated it to be reflective of the work that's been done up till now and the work that's in the policy in your binder. So I'm going to go through each of the steps that are in this policy. Number 1 is the notice of noncompliance. This is the first step, one that we've already operationalized by providing an agency with an initial inspection report, or IIR, when the inspection is complete and there are items of noncompliance. The IIR provides the agency with the 60-day timeline to submit the cap and the maximum amount of time that they have to correct the item, which is 90 days from the date of cap approval. The second step in the process is the cap development process. So once the corrective action plan has been received and approved by the BSCC, the agency, I'm sorry. Again, 60 days. 60 days from the notice of noncompliance in which to develop the cap and submit that approved cap to the BSCC. They have 60 days to do so. We encourage agencies to get those corrective action plans in before 60 days. And we're also encouraging agencies to submit draft corrective action plans so that our team can inform an agency if any of the required items are missing or there is an impediment to not approving the cap. So again, after the notice of noncompliance, step 2 is 60 days following that to for the agency to develop, submit, and for the BSCC to approve the cap. The third step is the final cap submission. Agencies must submit the corrective action plan by 12 p.m. on the 60th day following the IIR, which again is the notice of noncompliance. The Facility Standards and Operations Deputy Director will approve the cap and provide a notice of approval or denial to the agency by close of business on that day. So a couple of things that need to be in the cap that are outlined in this policy. Number 1 is the date for proposed resolution of the items of noncompliance. And the county can indicate either the maximum statutory reasonable timeline within 90 days, or they can choose a date that is shorter than that 90-day time frame. So we're calling that the county resolution date. Again, that's a reasonable date for correction that's earlier than the maximum 90 days for the statutory resolution date. And if an agency indicates that a county resolution date is earlier than 90 days, we will verify correction on that earlier date. We will not wait for those 90 days. Also needs to be included is a detailed description of each of the steps that will be taken to correct the items of noncompliance and when each step will be implemented in whatever timeframe they select. Things like updates to policy, staff training, county council approval, if there's county board of supervisor approval, required procurement of materials, scheduling of work orders, really anything. We're relying on the county to let us know what are the steps that they need to take in what time frame to get this item taken care of. Also, a description of the steps that will remedy the items and hopefully a durable and sustainable solution for keeping that item in compliance. If there's short-term or interim remedies, then the facility should absolutely include those as well. So once the BSCC receives that cap on or before the 60th day after the IIR, we will review them. If we don't receive the corrective action plan by 12 p.m. on that day, on the 60th day, the facility shall be unsuitable for the detention of juveniles. This is a change from the original cap policy. We interpreted the statute to include that if a cap is not received by that 60th day, or if the cap is denied, there is no notice of determination of suitability. That facility will be unsuitable for the detention of juveniles, and they will be noticed within 3 days. They then have 60 days to either correct the item of noncompliance or remove the juveniles from that facility. Part of the approval process, we've expanded in this policy. So in this policy, it describes what staff and the deputy director will be reviewing when considering approval of the cap. So the cap needs to contain all the elements I described earlier. What's the date? What are the steps for completion, for correction of that item? The agency needs to describe why the time frame for resolution is reasonable. They need to address the severity of the item of noncompliance. If it's not reasonable, if the severity of the item of noncompliance is such that the time frame that's been proposed isn't reasonable, that could be grounds for approval. We're going to consider if the item of noncompliance poses an immediate risk to the safety and health of the young people in that facility, or is there a deprivation of their constitutional rights. We're going to consider if there's likelihood of continued risk or harm to the youth if that item of noncompliance is not addressed within the time frame that's proposed, or there could be a more reasonable time frame. We'll also consider if the steps outlined align with a reasonable time frame. Could planning and implementation take place in a lesser amount of time? And are there any other measures that can be taken in the short term to reduce the risk of harm to the youth? A cap may be denied if the cap doesn't contain all the elements described above, if the proposed corrective action completed as described would not reasonably result in compliance, if the time frame for correction isn't reasonable, and if the time frame exceeds the maximum statutory resolution date, which is again 90 days from the date of approval of the cap. That's a lot for cap approval. Again, if the cap is denied or we don't receive it, the facility will be unsuitable. So once the cap has been approved, we move into the cap implementation period, and that's the period of time in which, again, up to 90 days, not to exceed 90 days, but it needs to be a reasonable time frame. The agency has that time frame to implement their plan and resolve the issue. When the issue is resolved, and again, it needs to be before, I cannot express that enough, before the timeframes outlined in their corrective action plan, the chief must notify the facility standards and operations deputy director that the item has been corrected. This doesn't necessarily correct the issue, and I'll explain that in a second, but it gives notice to the BSCC that the agency has corrected the issue, and they're confident that the item is in compliance. So the final step is for BSCC to verify the corrective action. While this could be done on the same day that the plan is complete, there are often times when there needs to be a pattern of compliance, a pattern of practice for the BSCC to review to determine compliance. For instance, you would want to see more than just 1 day of safety checks to determine compliance. You'd want to see several weeks of a pattern. So when BSCC staff goes out to verify the item of noncompliance, if it's not that day, they're looking backwards to that day, that effective date, to notify and determine that the item has been corrected. If corrective action has not been completed or the facility remains out of compliance following the resolution date, the agency will be given notice for determination of suitability at the next scheduled board meeting. So again, each of those steps on the screen correspond to the steps outlined in the policy. As I mentioned, we're going to be refining some of our practices through internal guidelines and regulation. And again, this is really narrowly focused on the notice of noncompliance, submission of the cap, correction of the items within the reasonable amount of time not to exceed 90 days, and when a facility will be either deemed unsuitable or provided notice that there will be a determination of suitability made. We have been in continued communication with advocacy attorneys with the Youth Law Center, the Children's Defense Fund, and the Peace and Justice Law Center. I'd like to thank them for the productive discussions and feedback, even though we might not align or take all of the recommendations that were made. We've made some significant improvements to this product, to the original draft, and believe we have a good product for board approval and for, again, operationalizing this statute. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Allison. It's a complicated issue. I appreciate your hard work on this. I know you felt like you got flustered, but you are lifting this item, and it is not simple by any means. So I appreciate all your work on this. Before I go to the board, I believe you've been provided letters, public comment letters, and they should all be in your materials. And I look to the board for any questions or comment on this issue. Supervisor Chavez?
Yes, thank you. I do want to just compliment the staff. I know this was in response to the board asking for clarity and I think our partners. So I really appreciate the clarity that you provided. Could you just speak a little bit to and Chair Penner, this may be more appropriate for you, but could you speak a little bit to the comments by the Peace and Justice Law Center, and in particular, the issues, and I'm having a hard time maybe understanding exactly the issue raised around timing that was raised in that. If someone could explain, it would be great. And then I have a follow-up question.
Happy to do that. And I'm going to punt over to council on the issue because that is, the crux of, sort of our disagreement on this issue is the timing, and it's an interpretation that I think best be handled by council.
Yeah, and if you look at the probably I would say the fundamental disagreement over the interpretation of the statute, which is set out in the board report, is the timing, which is we believe the way the statute is, or I believe the way the statute is structured, and what staff recommends is that the counties have 60 days in order to file the corrective action plan, and then they have a reasonable time frame not to exceed 90 days in order to come back into compliance. So let's just say the maximum time period for which corrective action could take place is 60 days plus 90 days, or 150 days total. The counter argument to that you see in the opposition letter is that the total amount of time from the initial inspection report to the corrective action plan being approved by the BSCC to implementation of the corrective action plan is 90 days total. So that the 60 days is inclusive in the 90-day period, but the entire total period from inspection, the notice of noncompliance, to rectification is just 90 days total. And I do not believe that the statute can be reasonably construed to do that. I understand the counter argument for that as well, but our interpretation is that it is 60 plus 90 days, and that is the fundamental disagreement. There are other things that we've continued to have conversations about, some of which have to deal with the post-corrective action plan and how we re-inspect and things like that. And we've had some good discussions around, what should be included in the determination of suitability. But as Ms. Ganter said, we're trying to keep this policy adoption pretty narrow to the inspection report and then the corrective action plan in that time frame. That I hope that answers your question.
Very, very helpful. And I would just be curious and if we've seen any legislative activity around clarifying the dates, if the, because this does feel like a, I don't know what the the way to describe it is, but it seems like it's so black and white in terms of the state legislation says this. And so I'm just wondering, has anybody said, okay, well, we'll change it then?
Not as of yet. We have not seen a bill introduced that's amending the timeframes in this section.
Great, thank you. And then one other just question as it relates to the this issue about the engagement of advocates in the process. And I recognize that's I'm actually not sure how that would be operationalized, but I'm just curious how and what you consider maybe some opportunities to address, frankly, the disagreement we get from the formal entity that we're evaluating, and then the community that's coming forward saying that we're not seeing the change. And frankly, in Los Angeles, I felt like we got a lot of really good information from the public, and I'm just wondering if you all have considered whether or not there's a way to make sure we get more experiential information included in the process, or if there's a reason that we wouldn't want to do that, which is honestly that there's some guidelines that you all are looking at specifically that we're trying to make sure that these carceral facilities meet. Could you give some thoughts on that?
I can do. Well, I'll start and then ask Allison to fill in. I mean, some of that is a little bit challenging, and I would say we do get input from various stakeholders in terms of if we in terms of being made aware of what problems might be happening in the facility, and we certainly will look into issues that we hear about. It's a little bit challenging to get specific community input on an inspection, simply because what we are asking our inspectors to do is to do the inspection, and they write up the reports based on the information that they see, that they touch, that they witness. They do talk to youth within the facilities, they talk to staff. And so, we whatever other information might be had from parents or from other community members could be helpful, but we certainly depend on our inspectors to put eyes on the items of noncompliance. And that's what we have to rely on in terms of when we find a facility out of compliance.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna to follow on to Erin's comment. That's a really good summary. I mean, it is our job to look at the evidence to determine compliance or non-compliance. And we do take a lot of input from community members, from family members. When we have that information, we incorporate it into our inspection. We no longer do inspections every 2 years. In Los Angeles, we're doing inspections on a monthly basis, twice monthly basis. So when we get feedback, we incorporate that into our inspection process so that our inspectors can then go review any evidence related to those issues. When a person that is visiting the facility says that they feel that something's out of compliance, or they disagree with the inspector's determination, we might not be looking at the same information. We have a checklist, we have a process. We're happy to talk about how we do that. So what's helpful for us in terms of feedback is specificity around a concern. If there's dates, if there's any more specifics, we take those things into consideration, and our field reps will often do an unannounced inspection, or if the inspection is coming up, they'll use that information. So it's hard to compare the formal process that a BSCC field representative is doing for inspection, and have a disagreement about compliance if we don't know we're looking at the same evidence. I guess that's the best way to say it. But we take all of that into consideration when we do our inspections, especially in Los Angeles. We're in communication with a lot of community partners.
And Ms. Ganter, is there a formal process that we explain to the public about how to get information to you? And I apologize for not knowing that, because there may be a website or a phone number that people regularly call.
We have a webmaster, which if any information, really, if our agency is such that if somebody emailed our general public comment or our webmaster, it would get to us. But also on our website, you can see our staff roster and who's responsible for which facilities. So you could find out who the field representative is for Fresno County or El Dorado County and directly email that field representative and share concerns. It's pretty straightforward. But that's actually a great question. But again, it's pretty, the way our agency works, it's pretty easy for that information to get to us.
You know, one thing that I would just want the staff to think about, colleagues, I would just hope this is something you consider, is I do think having a formal way for people to engage may be a benefit, because I think the point you're raising, Ms. Cantor, is I think people, unless they know the agency well or know you all, I have found you all to be very responsive, very engaged when people reach out. But if you're a novice to this, or there's something that's important going on, the way people seem to formally understand how to engage is by coming and speaking at the meetings, which I think is great. And that's one thing that we want to absolutely encourage. But sometimes to get into the deeper set of information, a 1-minute comment isn't, or 2 minutes isn't the way to do it. And so if there was a more formal mechanism, then maybe that would ease some concerns. And I think your point is really well taken as to, you know, people having different opinions about what problems we're trying to solve. So I don't want to make that more complicated, but I do think something that's formal and public, that people say, oh, this is my way to have input and give information in a process, would be beneficial.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment. My, just kind of thinking through that process. One of the things that is difficult for us is that our responsibility, again, not to overuse a word, is narrowly focused on the requirements in Title 15. And there are a host of other concerns, and rightfully so, that people have about operation of detention facilities. So what happens sometimes is if we get a concern that might not be found in Title 15, we don't have the authority to then investigate or even inspect for such an incident. And I understand that frustrates people. So just kind of thinking out loud, if we were to have a process, we'd need to really reiterate that our responsibility is to inspect for compliance with the requirements that are outlined in a specific section of Title 15.
You know, I think one thing that, you know, this is my last board meeting, and I will just say that one thing that's been, that I think that Chair Penner and Katie have really tried to help me understand, is the limitations of the role and the scope of this agency. And I think that's a really fair point, because what's been reiterated to me over and over again, and I think fairly, is we don't want to raise expectations in the community to say that we can do something that we actually aren't, that we don't have the purview to do. So I think that's very fair feedback. I also think that there are very few places outside of people's counties that they can go to file complaints that they know about. And I think sometimes this agency gets a bad rap for not being responsive when it's not within scope. And I want to just emphasize that I understand that. I wonder if there is a way for us to make sure that the mechanisms for people to be able to report any number of issues can either go back to the counties or to the Attorney General or whatever that is, but on a web portal that allows people when they come to us to be able to look at, and for us to be able to say, this really goes to the AG, this goes back to the county, so that we can be more responsive. Because one of the things I find fascinating about the staff, and I'll just say to the new board members, that you will find is the level of expertise and professionalism of your team is remarkable. It's really very, it's very, very, I mean, really, it's excellent. And there's such confusion about what's within and not within your purview that I think the agency gets a bad rap. And I think we'd have a better rap if we were really able to clearly define what information needs to go to whom to get problems addressed and resolved. And I think, colleagues, I'll just share that that I think we're still in a transformation and about what kinds of relationships we have with the public writ large, especially in the area of public safety and justice. And you've got a lot of experts there that will have better input than I on the appropriate way to do this. But I really would encourage my colleagues and the staff to give that some serious consideration, because I do think it's been a problem the entire time I've been on the board. I've had a hard time. You've both all said to me, nope, this is in our scope, that's not in our scope. And I can't imagine what that must be like for the public.
Just to add on one thing, I want to, it's because it's really important to me that when we respond to either a formal complaint or an inquiry from a family member, my team is really careful to address the concern specifically and say that, this is our authority. Here are some ideas on how to reach out further, whether it's in the county or it's the state DOJ or something like that. So I appreciate that that feedback, and it's a really strong value of our team to make sure that when somebody reaches out to us, we don't just say, "Oh, we don't. This is not what we do." So if there's a way to make that more apparent, we'll certainly think about that. But it's
And more,
incredibly
frankly,
important.
more formal. Because again, I agree with you. I've never gotten a complaint that someone hasn't been responded to by the staff. That's not an issue. It really is, though. What's the formal way that people can get the help they need, and how is that codified in the way that we operate so that there's not confusion over roles and responsibilities?
And I would add this. I think the state has made great strides. They have created OYCR, and that agency itself has an ombudsman who is specifically in place for the very formal purpose you register with us today, understanding it's an imperfect system in that ours is very narrow, legalistic, and regulated. And as you expressed, we're careful to stay within our parameters as we move forward on these inspections, because there's a great deal of oversight and concern, but we do not want to give the impression that we can react outside of our purview. With that said, we've come a long way in terms of creating the new office. I think the governor felt strongly about giving people the very voice that you're interested in giving them, and they've done that. There is a Youth Bill of Rights that is now currently posted in every waiting room, in every juvenile facility in the state of California, and that gives both families and the youth access to that agency. So it's an imperfect system, and I'm not sure we have all the answers in this room today, and I appreciate the issues you raise, and we'll continue to work hard on it and try to be transparent and responsive and never leave anybody hanging. We also are quick to react and do an unannounced inspection if it is something that comes to our attention. And maybe you don't hear enough about that in this boardroom, but I can assure you that's ongoing too. Anybody else? Yes.
I do, Madam Chair. So I take comfort in what you're saying, that you did engage with some of these groups who I think are really trying to do the right thing for the right reason. The overarching, we're all here to do the right thing for the right reasons. But since the time frame seems to be the sticking point for some people, how are we? Help me understand, and maybe this is a question for council. If we're interpreting the statute saying that after the 60 days, they have 90 days, do we feel that we are in a position to say that if it's a problem we think can be fixed in less than 90 days, that we can impose that and then enforce that, even though the statute may say a 90-day window. I don't know if I'm making sense, but.
No, that's a good
You're
question.
making sense.
No,
Yeah.
that is a great question. And that is one of the things that we've continually talked about in terms of what the statute provides for, is that the timeframe for correction has to be a reasonable timeframe, not to exceed 90 days. Now, the question immediately pops to mind is, well, what does that mean in terms of the reasonable timeframe? And so we've tried to put additional parameters in the draft policy that, looks at the factors and what we will weigh when determining what should the timeframe be in terms of that correction. So that, and we can still continue to have those conversations about what we think is reasonable or not in terms of how fast something should be corrected. And again, that maybe goes from, well, how quickly can it be fixed? And it should be fixed as soon as possible to this has to be a new policy, a new directive has to be put in the field, county council has to sign up, all those different steps that might require a lengthier corrective action period. But yes, we can ask people, well, the timeframe we have to approve is reasonable. And then what that means is, we have to look on a case-by-case basis. But the discrepancy is, they get the 60 days from, again, this is my interpretation of the statute. They get the 60 days, then they get a reasonable time period after the 60 days in order to come into compliance. And that's how I currently read the statute.
So it would be fair to say then that they have a reasonable amount of time, but they don't just get 90 days.
Right.
It's not just a gimme of you can drag your feet for 89 days and then do something about it. So I appreciate that, because I think that makes more sense, and I think that might help some people understand. I share the supervisor's comments that working with this staff for as long as I have, since I've been 10 years at the sheriff's office, 15 years in city policing before that, which I didn't have interaction. But I do believe that you are holding people accountable and that you're doing your job correctly. And so I just want to make sure that people understand that it's not just a free 90-day window that people are getting. It still has to be a reasonable amount of time. And then I would piggyback on another thing the supervisor was talking about, that I think something that the public doesn't often think about is that a lot of these things that we are trying to do cost money. And as for myself, speaking as an elected sheriff, I don't control that. So you may be coming to us with some concerns about our custodial facilities or the probation or the juvenile facilities, and we share your frustration. We share your what needs to get fixed. You also need to lean on your county supervisors to fund that, because there's a lot of things that we can go in and pound our fists on and speak to people on the dais and express that we need these things fixed. But if they don't release the funding, then it can't be fixed. So in this process of you complaining and trying to make things better, include your county supervisors in that, because that's where the funding mechanisms are going to come from. Thank you.
And I think that's what's really important in this policy, requiring agencies to outline the steps that helps us determine if that time frame is reasonable. Because if we know step one is, set an agenda item at the, board meeting to request funding to fix said item, and that takes 40 days, having that information helps us determine what is reasonable. We really need the agencies to explain to us their idea of reasonable and hoping it all aligns. We use an example of, there's a requirement in 1371 for a schedule to be hung on the wall. So that young people can see the daily schedule. And if we get a corrective action plan at day 60 and they say, well, it's going to take 90 days to post that schedule. Step one is print it. That's going to take 40 days. That's our really clear example of something that would be denied for not being a reasonable time frame, because theoretically it should take, in this day and age, a few minutes to print up a poster and plunk it on the wall. So that's our extreme example of something that would be deemed unreasonable. But again, really focusing on what are those steps, like what do you have to do and how long does it take to do those things? By tape, 10 days, things like that.
And
Yes,
I want
question.
to piggyback real quick on that example too, because the other challenging thing with the statute is the consequence of the denial of a cap for for, let's say, that reason, that this is not a reasonable time frame, so we're going to deny this cap. What the statute provides for is that the facility is then deemed unsuitable at that point. And so there are significant consequences to the denial of a cap, and that's why we've also built in the policy attempts at providing drafts to us so that we can provide technical assistance before either approval or denial on that. We want things fixed in a reasonable period of time is what we want.
Thank you. Brian?
So between Sheriff Taylor's comments and council's comments just now, it frames pretty well for me what my single concern with the plan is. And it's not the extreme examples, and I have never found Ms. Ganter to be unreasonable, by the way, in my years of history with her. However, I can see a day perhaps where she doesn't stand at that podium, 25 years from now. My point is this, there are going to be more nuanced examples where, I'll just use my own jurisdiction as the example. We submit a cap and the time frame is disagreed upon by staff and they reject the cap and say, no, we need to see a more reasonable time frame. And I explain the reasonableness of my time frame and they say, well, that's nice, but it's still denied. And I get multiple denials up to that 60-day window and all of a sudden I'm unsuitable because staff disagrees with what I'm telling them the reality on the ground is. But there's no appeal opportunity for me to come directly to the appointed board to say, look, I understand where staff's coming from, but, and I need to be heard on this. And so for that one situation, which again would never happen with Allison, but could potentially happen, it seems to me that there should be some small mechanism in that type of situation where an administrator can come directly to the board and say, I need to be heard prior to me being found unsuitable at day 60. Because by operation of law, I would be, because I can't do what staff is suggesting I have to do.
And just to also add on to what Brian is making the point, because I think also, Allison, there is a provision that's talked about in number 5, where during that 90-day period, let's say I say that I need 30 days to make my correction, but really I do have 90 by statute to be able to fix that. And so, in one of the things that I've had concerns about just as a board member and as we've heard conversations around the state with different reps and different, how things are, and, in one county it's, looked at in a different way, in another county it's looked at in a different way. It's just kind of that consistency of that answer of what kinds of things would be approved. And so I see here on B where it talks about the deputy director, you would be the final arbiter of whether that would be approved if we did need more time and if there was some disagreement, at least between the rep and the county. But I understand Brian's point is that if there's still disagreement, even at your level, what is the mechanism for us to be able to resolve that sometime prior to that 60-day period? Or, it may go beyond that, and what would be the remedy there? But I think the consistency piece of that is, I think, one of the more concerning on the ground, boots on the ground kind of concerns we have.
I agree. And I think, I don't want to speak for council, but we do plan on looking to build some regulations around this process. And that's something that we've talked about that, right, that isn't built into the WIC process, but it could be built into regulation, there being an appeal process, for sure. Because I understand that concern.
Thank you. Good point. And that is part of our urgency to get this cap approved so that we can then begin to build it into the reg process as your ESC moves forward with the Juvenile Regulations Committee. So we're working hard to be a finisher on this piece of it so we can move to the next. Any other board members? All very, very good comments. And we don't like to build a process that's Allison Ganter centric. And so I think the agency is committed to whomever fills that job is well equipped to manage the duties they're faced with. And also we do a great deal of outreach to the chiefs, the sheriffs, and the public to ensure that we're hearing concerns they have as we move forward on an individual process each time. If they think that a staff member has been harsh. We generally hear about that pretty quick. I think you've been in the room when I've been there. So, you know, I don't foresee that ever being something that the BSCC isn't committed to, regardless of what personnel sit in the seat. Any further from the board? I'm going to go to public comment. Adam?
We have 4 public comment on Zoom. So let's get the timer up. And we will call on the first person. That would be Sonia. Sonia, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Good morning. I'm a longtime resident of LA County and a member of the board, the local activist group Hangout Do Good. I'm also a retired state prosecutor. The proposed CAP process was just made available to the public. There hasn't been enough time for meaningful public comment. For example, the Peace and Justice Law Center raised important issues in its written comment. Please put this agenda item over to the next meeting to allow for meaningful feedback. Also, I'd like to say that I agree with Commissioner Chavez about greater community engagement and a lot of her other comments. Having worked for the state AG for over 30 years, I understand the issue of scope of statutory authority, but that answer can also be a cop-out. You need to dig deeper to fix problems that are raised. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Aaron Palacios. Aaron, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name's Erin Palacios. I'm with Prisma Legal Center for Youth Justice. I want
Aaron,
to clarify.
Aaron, I won't take this out of your time. We can't hear you, so either you need to get closer to your microphone. You're a little bit.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah.
I want to make something clear, which is that we have been working with council and staff on this proposal, but we have not been doing it on behalf of advocates overall. We have been doing it without speaking to the rest of the advocacy community because we did it in our mind in order to avoid litigation on this issue. I'm sorry. And that means that we have not been providing those drafts along the way and feedback from other advocates in order to do that. And I don't think that our position can be taken as belonging to the advocacy community as a whole. I also want to say that I asked for more time to review this because I've only had it for a couple of days and have spent a lot of time working with staff and council on it. So would have appreciated more time to actually meaningfully respond since we last met with staff and council about this in February. I tried to send a letter this morning because I had to write one last night, and I've managed to send it to the board members whose email I have, but I know it's not listed on the public comment. I also requested time to address the board directly because I don't think after all of the good faith efforts we've put in, a 2-minute public comment is sufficient to be able to explain our position. We have multiple issues with the timing, including that notice of noncompliance is not set to be prompt, which I noted in the letter. The fact that it's not clear to us that the board is authorized to delegate most of these activities to staff. The board has the ability to delegate ministerial duties. Those are duties that are mere obligations, not discretionary duties, which means duties that have an exercise of judgment, such as the approval of a cap or the reasonable time frame. The other piece of the 90-day timeline that I want to be clear about is we think that the entire structure.
Your time is up, Aaron. Thank you. Next, we have Helen. Helen, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Helen Eigenberg, and I'm just calling in. I'm a longtime resident of Los Angeles County. I'm also a member of Hangout Do Good. And just listening to all this, there's a lot of questions. So I'm just going to ask that the BSCC please put this agenda item over to the next meeting to allow for a lot of meaningful feedback. I think it's really important. And we're talking about young people's lives and their situations. And rash decisions are never good. So please put this agenda over to the next meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nancy Juarez. Nancy, please go ahead. There you go.
Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. Nancy Juarez with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. I'm echoing what folks have already shared. I'm requesting that the board not take a vote on this process today, but invite more community to give direct feedback. I'm very appreciative for the process and how board members included community voice and other experts in the space for the opioid survey. That process resulted in the results that we were looking at today. So if we could mirror, and I think that's what Supervisor Chavez was kind of getting at as well, and uplifting, if we can mirror some sort of process where we can include community voice, because it's not just about inspections, right? It's about the process itself. So I urge the board to take this back. Chair Penner also said that she's not sure that that the board has all the answers in the room today. Considering that, I ask that y'all take this back and invite more community members and maybe have a conversation offline, similar to the process we did with the opioid survey. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Aditi. Aditi, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Aditi Sharakar with Children's Defense Fund California. I just want to echo the comments already made about the need for community input. This goes beyond the actual non-compliance process, but for this specific process we're talking about today, this really will set the foundation for how the board addresses very serious and sometimes life-threatening non-compliance in these facilities, as we've seen in LA County. And it should not be done without the board directly hearing from community, hearing from experts, hearing from those who have been watching this process unfold unsuccessfully many times in the last few years. And I urge you to, instead of voting on the process that's in front of you today, actually come up with a way for community to talk to the board about this, to address the board, to make their concerns known beyond a 2-minute public comment. One of the reasons you don't have more people in that room today at this meeting is because 2 minutes just simply feels tokenizing. It doesn't feel like they've had enough. It's just not possible to have been able to digest this. And there's no way that even you as board members could have digested it and really come up with questions and come up with ways to find out the answers to those questions. You've had it for so little time. It would be an egregious misuse of your duty if you approved it without taking some more time with it. And you also need to hear from board members that are missing today. Some of your key board members from LA County are not present to be part of this discussion and answer questions. They have been so close to this process since LA County has been in and out of cycles for so long that you should at least wait until September to vote so that you can get their input. You can have them have a chance to ask council and Ms. Ganter questions. So please defer any votes to September.
Thank you. Next, we had Marissa. Marissa, did you still want to speak? If you do, please raise your hand. And there she is. Marissa, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Marissa Levin. Thank you for giving me the time. I am a long-term LA resident. I'm also a member of Hangout Do Good, and I'm just calling in to ask that this be continued, reiterating what the previous speakers have said. You don't need to hear it again, but I feel the same way. It's far too important to rush past it. And there's too many questions still unanswered and important participants who need to have the opportunity to have their voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Yusuf Miller on Zoom. Yusuf, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, this is Youssef Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition out of San Diego County, Saving Lives in Custody campaign. And I agree with what's already been said. We need to postpone this vote and get community input. This is the only way we can put this thing on the ground running and running properly. So please defer the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to look in the room to see if there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on this item. And we have no one in the room.
I'm back to the board. Anybody Any comments? I actually have some inquiries. I know the answer to them already, but I would like it on the record. Let me begin by saying this conversation started in May of 2023. And it is an important policy. It needs to be implemented. It needs to find its way into the agency so it is subject to regulation as needed when we do finish our process on the juvenile regulations. I know that there have been numerous meetings with numerous bodies that have shared their feelings, their reaction, their agreements, and their disagreements. And I know we have moved some of the issues they raised that we originally had in this policy to comport with things that they wanted us to address. There are some things that we continue to stand in, disagreement on. And that doesn't indicate that we haven't heard and we haven't listened and we haven't wanted input. And so I am championing, hoping, desiring that this process moves forward with closure today. There will be additional opportunities for input and interpretation as it goes to the regulatory process. This is a long-standing issue, and we've just, in my opinion, come to the juncture where we'll have to agree to disagree, and we need to move this forward. Not a popular sentiment, I'm sure, with those who spoke, and I'm empathetic, but I also believe this is a very narrow policy that is going to direct very narrow procedures in our agency, and there are opportunities going forward to address other concerns that may present. Any other comments from the board? Yes, Supervisor Chavez.
I just have one more. And this is actually in response to one of my board colleagues' comments. I want to better understand, is it a change that the staff is the final arbiter? Is that a change in this policy?
No.
It's not a change in the policy. That was the delegation that was done back in April. Was it April? May of last year, which was to have a Deputy Director Ganter be the approver of the corrective action plans. And that's been that was the unwritten policy for a long time. And this is just putting, again, it's basically reaffirming the delegation that was done back last year.
Thank you.
Chair Penner, I'm in favor of moving this forward. Is it possible that maybe staff could post their guidelines or regulations in a transparent portal where people can take a look at what they're actually doing? This is so complex. It's not going to solve every problem that custodial facilities have, but it's what the legislature has given your staff to do. So I'd be in favor of moving forward with the regulations being posted where people can actually read them and understand how complex of a job they have.
So the policy, I differentiate between the policy and the regulation. And so we do have our regulations open and subject to public review at any time. And in fact, our inspections are out there. I mean, everything in terms of that deep dive is on our website. And the regulatory process itself, if anybody would like to take a moment and describe what that entails, is very lengthy, subject to a great deal of public comment over a long period of time. So I think we'll get the transparency people are hoping for. This is just an agency policy that needs adoption to move forward with the next step in the process. And so we continue to talk about how narrowly focused this is. And I know it's a lot of talking, but and a lot of conversation and diagrams that go forever, taking you through step by step. But that, in my opinion, agree or disagree is at least adds clarity to those who don't like the way we're doing our job and those who do like the way doing our job. It's out there for everybody once it's adopted and able to, that makes everybody able to take their concerns, voice them, and move them forward to the regulatory process. I hope that's clear. It's really a complicated issue on a very narrow set of facts that we're trying to work on. And understanding that people aren't satisfied with our process, I am very grateful for the amount of time and effort staff has put into the many, many conversations they've had with all the stakeholders surrounding this issue. So am I missing something here? Aaron, do you think there's a better way to respond to Chief Mills?
No, I think you covered it, Madam Chair, and yeah, when this policy then gets reduced back to regulations, it will be back before the board again.
Correct.
So is that a motion, Chief?
That is a motion. I move that we move forward with the regulations as stated.
All right.
Then I'd second that.
Before we take a vote, can I have just one
Yes, yes.
point of clarity? Yeah, because as we go through the Title 15, Title 24 regulation, revision process, as this policy comes as part of, us taking a look at the regulation where we're providing some operationalizing the, what our interpretation of the statute. Of course, there will be public comment opportunities for there to be input there. And even for the ESC to be able to make recommended updates based on the public comment if there are going to be. So those opportunities will be there for those, if there are, those kind of recommendations that could come through that process as well. So I just wanted to just kind of reiterate Chair Pinner's point about as it does move through, if it is approved, if the policy is approved today, that the opportunity for comment and for any revisions, if there are any, by the recommended from the ESC, then that could be the potential place too.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? I have a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber. Aye. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Haynes.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Ms. Chavez.
No.
Mr. Richard.
Aye.
Ms. Guard recused. Mr. Mills.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item G.
Thank you very much. Now moving on to item F. And Ms. Ganter, you may stay right where you are. We're here to hear from you about the local detention facilities inspection update. And just as a reminder,
We need Janet Guard back.
okay, as a reminder to all on the board, this is a informational item. So we'll wait for Janet. We need a little quick break while we're waiting. Yeah, let's take 5 if you don't mind. All right. We have delicious fruit. Ready, ladies and gentlemen, to reconvene?
Oh, sure.
Okay, we're going to now, oh, it's Ms. Ganter
It's
again.
me.
Item F, local detention facilities inspection update. Thank you, Allison.
Yes, hello, it is now afternoon, so good afternoon, Chair Penner and board members, colleagues and community members. Allison Ganter, Deputy Director with the Facility Standards and Operations Division, and I'm here to provide the regular update on our facility inspections, and outstanding items of noncompliance. And you have copies of some reports in your binders. We are in the process of updating our online dashboards. I'm going to give you a preview in just a moment. I want to give a huge shout out to my colleague Eric Weston in research, who has built some really awesome databases, dashboards with some quick view information that I'll share with you in a moment. Thank you so much, Eric, for your help on the dashboards. I am going to begin with adult inspections. Right now, we don't have any current recommendations for a sheriff to come before the board. You will recall that there were outstanding items of noncompliance with safety checks in both the Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County and the Men's Central Jail in Los Angeles County. Both targeted and unannounced inspections have been happening in those facilities. Field Representative Jill Ferris was in Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County to conduct follow-up in April. And while improvements have been made, they remained out of compliance at that time. She will be back in the coming weeks to conduct their targeted inspection, which will again include a review of compliance with safety checks. Field Representative Tracy Kessler will be in Los Angeles at the Men's Central Jail next week. She's conducted several follow-up inspections, both announced and unannounced. She's seen noticeable improvement in their safety checks. The agency has issued several directives to staff, and they're building what we believe is a sustainable solution to that, and we're hoping to see compliance in Los Angeles soon. And our field representatives continue to be out there. They're conducting follow-up on items of noncompliance that remain outstanding from our comprehensive inspections in 2023, and also the items of noncompliance this year. So I just want to express my appreciation for my team's continued hard work and diligence on this issue. We are now in the last 6 months of the second year of our 2-year inspection cycle. As you know, during 2024, we've been conducting targeted inspections in both adult and juvenile detention facilities. So I will show you it's not live yet, but it will be soon, our dashboard for the current items of noncompliance with the adult detention facilities. So again, you can see, yes, you can. So you can see here these really cool graphics. You can see that right now there's 3 outstanding items of noncompliance in our county jails. This does not include items of noncompliance at this moment in police department, temporary holding and type 1 facilities or court holding facilities at this time. There's 2 items of noncompliance in Lassen, 1 in Madera, and then there's another cool chart underneath there that gives us the summary of the frequency of those items of noncompliance. Since there's just a few of them right now, you can see them pretty easily. 2 in sobering cell, 1 in exercise and out of cell time. And then further on down into the chart, you can get the detail related to the inspection findings. And finally, when items of noncompliance are corrected, they fall to the bottom of this table. We're working on adding a few more variables. So when this is posted up out there in the world, it will have a little bit more information for you. In your binder, and I can also pull up the 2023. It doesn't switch. Oh yeah, it switched. There are still a number of outstanding items of noncompliance from the previous year's inspections. Again, we're still in the same 2-year inspection cycle. And as I mentioned, our staff, our team continue to go out and conduct follow-up inspections, both announced and unannounced, providing technical assistance and hopefully moving toward compliance in those areas. So I will move on to items of non-compliance in juvenile detention facilities. And again, you see the same 2 graphics on the top here. There are currently 3 counties with outstanding items of non-compliance. Again, below you'll see sorry, I can't talk today. I apologize.
It's our
Take a
fault.
deep
We've worn you out. You just take your time.
Okay, so you can see that there are outstanding items of noncompliance in Alameda County, in Kings County, and Los Angeles. And again, the same thing is with the adult ones, the frequency of each of these items. You'll see that the most frequent are staffing, suicide prevention plan, and then programs, recreation, exercise. What's really I think awesome about this updated chart is that there's three charts underneath three tables underneath the two charts. So what you'll see first is the list of counties with current items of noncompliance. And if we haven't yet received their corrective action plan, and you can see the due date. Alameda's is first. It's the corrective action plan is due on August 10th, and then you can see the detail related to the items of noncompliance in each of the facilities in Alameda, in Kings, and in Los Angeles counties. And then second, when we receive a county's corrective action plan, and again, we have not received corrective action plan for these counties just yet, what we'll show is that the corrective action plan approval date, which again will be within those 60 days, and then the maximum statutory timeline, those 90 days from CAP approval that they have to fix the item. The third table is the updated corrected items of noncompliance. And what you can see here is that, for instance, in Butte County Jail, they had a CAP due date of June 2nd. They actually submitted and had their corrective action plan approved on May 21st, so several days earlier than the 60 days. They had until August 19th. That's the 90 days from May 21st to correct the item. And they actually corrected it on June 28th. We're going to work to make this a little bit more highlighty. But what's important here is that you can see how they address the timeline in which they address their items of noncompliance, and if they submitted earlier than those 60 days and corrected it earlier than the 90 days. When I get to the end, I can take any questions related to the adult or juvenile items of noncompliance, but I wanted to provide a quick update on Los Angeles County probation, and I'll stop my share right there. So since the April board meeting, Field Representative Lisa Southwell has been conducting 2 inspections in the Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall and also the Barry J. Nydorf Secure Youth Treatment Facility. Each month, one of the inspections is announced and the other is unannounced. So again, it's a total of 4 inspections, 2 at each facility. During May's inspections and during June's unannounced inspections, we found no items of noncompliance at either facility. However, during the June 27th announced inspection at the Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, we found noncompliance with Section 1371, which is Programs, Recreation, and Exercise. While the documentation of the programs indicated compliance with this section, our review of video showed that not all of the programs that were documented were actually happening. So we noticed the agency on June 28th. They have until August 27th to submit a CAP. And if they submit on that date, they would have until November 25th to correct this issue. We do anticipate, based on some conversations, we do anticipate receiving a CAP sooner than 60 days. We've also been informed that the department is in the process of investigating staff involved in this issue, and they will be working through their internal administrative processes to address what I would say is a terrible finding. And we'll continue to keep the board apprised of this issue and of the outcome of the continued inspections at the facilities. We found no items of noncompliance at the Barry J. Nydorf Secure Youth Treatment Facility. And we're going to continue our inspections this month. We will still have 4 inspections, 2 at each facilities. We're also looking forward to getting a comprehensive inspection of each of those facilities done in the coming months. So at some point, we'll switch from doing these monthly targeted inspections to a full comprehensive inspection of both facilities. That is my update, and I will take any questions that you may have.
Looking to the board for questions or comments.
My only comment is that without having all the information, that's very troubling finding with the Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. And I would hope to see something soon from them about how they're going to deal with staff on that, because I think that's pretty serious what's happening there.
Agreed. Chief?
A couple things on that finding or the failure in compliance. Did it appear that it was tied again to insufficient staffing, that those programs were not being provided? They just simply weren't being provided?
That is correct.
Okay. My other question is, in following up with a couple of things that we were assured of back in April, one of those things was that ongoing documentation would be made available to BSCC staff. I just want to ensure that that is continuing to occur.
That is correct. We have, we get regular weekly updates from the agency, and our team goes through those on a regular basis. So we do have all of the documentation, which we had been reviewing, that revealed or indicated, I would say, compliance. And then we followed up with a video review, as we've been doing lately.
Okay. Then one of the questions I had back in April of Los Angeles County, they didn't quite have the information, and I'm not sure if they followed up with it, although they indicated they would, is to what degree they're relying on deployed staff into the institutions, and whether that is beginning to improve, and we're seeing more post positions being covered by full-time, fully trained detention staff rather than part-time deployed field staff.
It's a three-part answer. They are still relying and plan to continue to rely on deployed staff. We have evidence that all of the staff that are deployed are being fully trained appropriately to the facility. So that's good news. And in the staffing documentation that we've reviewed, they've established some minimum staffing numbers for us to actually compare to. They've been meeting those numbers. They have made an attempt to make sure that posts are filled properly. And they haven't, interesting enough, your question to why aren't programs being delivered? There's no indication that programs or services are being denied related to lack of staffing. So while they're still relying on deployed staff, they've much improved their compliance with staffing.
Last question. The targeted inspections, you indicated back in April that they were going to be focused on those areas of deficiency and not other areas necessarily, unless we kind of stumble across something like this. But has that continued to be the case? It's just focusing in on these priority issues that we've established from the past?
Yes, we have been focusing, sometimes one of the things that we've been picking up is, access to the restrooms at night, or, cleanliness of the facility. We'll pick up other things along the way, but the general focus is on those areas, yes. Or targeted focus, I should say. Thanks.
Anything further from board members? Okay, seeing none. Adam?
I have one member of the public who wishes to make a comment,
Thank you.
and we'll get the timer up. And that would be Aditi. Aditi, please go ahead. You'll have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon again. I want to remind this board at the last April meeting, when Los Angeles was once again on your agenda, there was talk about how there would be no more tolerance for these abuses by Los Angeles County Probation, and that they had used up any kind of goodwill that they may have had in the past. And I want to highlight that this non-compliance item is not just about programs and recreation or staffing. This is the discrepancy between what is on paper and what you are finding in the video, which means that you can't trust anything is in compliance. If you have to double check every log to make sure that they are actually telling the truth. The non-compliance item says that when a scheduled or documented program was observed on video, there were many times that the duration of the program did not match the time indicated on documentation. It says many programs indicated on the facility schedule and documented on facility activity logs did not occur. So how can you trust that this facility is safe and taking care of young people, given its history, knowing that we've already had a young person pass away in a Los Angeles County facility due to probation negligence? And you know that this is not a county that can ever seem to sustain compliance for longer than a month at most. It is unconscionable to sit there and think that we can wait till November to see if this gets fixed when you know that their activity logs, their documentation does not match what your eyes see on video. So if this board were to just paper over this and say, okay, let's see, let's wait for their cap, let's wait for November, you are yet again putting the youth of Los Angeles County in danger. And I hope that you remember all of your strong statements from April about LA County not being given any further chances. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more public commenters.
Thank you. And in the audience?
Do we have anyone in the audience who wish to make a comment? Please proceed to the podium. And we do not.
Okay, that anyone on the board wish to make a comment? Any further comment? This is not an action item, so we will not be voting, just information only. So as we come to closure on that, this is the time set for the board to go into closed session. Did she say she's right this time? I thought that's what I heard. So, I like that, Katie. We will clear the room and Supervisor Chavez will stay with us.
Actually, Supervisor, did she leave already? Supervisor Chavez, I
I'm
just want to
here.
make sure you have the link to the separate
Oh, got it.
closed session. It should be on your calendar.
Thank you. I
So go
appreciate
ahead and leave this meeting and join us on the closed session link.
Do we wait for it to say recording started? Okay, thank you. We're going back on the record. This is the time, the meeting where we are open to public comment. You may comment on any item, whether it was or was not on the board agenda. Adam?
Calling for members on Zoom for any comments. And I currently do not have any raised hands. And I'm going to now turn into the room. If you have a public comment, please proceed to the podium. And we have no one in the queue.
Okay, then I would thank all of you for being here and this meeting's adjourned.
Be well all.